It's a very entertaining movie. You never know with these film festival movies. You just see, a slew of films, and it's kind of a classic immigrant story with a kind of a political, I guess, edge to it. So why don't we talk a bit about that idea of who this person is? Let's start with the title. What does America stand for? This is a good sort of setup.
Sure. America is the Arabic word for America.
Okay.
And I wanted a title that was representative of the sort of melding of cultures that is very much the film.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, and so this is, why don't you just give us a little background, because most of the people who will be watching this video won't have seen the film. Just give us a little quick narrative run-through of the situation.
Absolutely. So the film is about a Palestinian single mom who immigrates to the U.S. with her teenage son and winds up with relatives in rural Illinois, sort of has to face the challenges of not just starting a new life in, small town middle America, but also of sort of dealing with some of the fallout of the political climate. And
the first, I don't know if it's 15, 20, 25 minutes, it takes place, she has to go through crossing guards through Bethlehem just to get home. And so life is not, perfect in her homeland. And the decision for her to go was a kind of a wrenching one. Talk a bit about the decision to actually leave one's homeland it's emphasized throughout the rest of the film that how tough that is. Just talk a bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was something that I wanted to articulate the difficulty of that, because I think it really is probably one of the toughest decisions that people have to make in their lives. And for Muna, I think that I definitely wanted to show the difficulty of life in the West Bank, and as you said, she goes through, she has to go through a number of checkpoints just to get home. We see sort of the mundanity of her job and the sort of dead-end feeling that she has sort of working there. We see that she's divorced and sort of hiding from, the shadows of a failed marriage, and living with a very controlling mother. So all of these are sort of reasons for her to want to run away.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the main reason comes from her son, who is ecstatic at the thought of going to the U.S. and, the opportunity that represents. And also, there is sort of an altercation between her son and a soldier at the checkpoint that sort of fills her with fear. And that's really the moment where she decides, it's sort of that moment where it's like, if he safely gets back in this car, we're leaving.
Yeah.
That's the moment where it's, I think, crystallizes for her that, if anything happened to him, she would never forgive herself for not taking up this opportunity.
And at that point in the movie, I think most people that are watching are thinking, whew, good, an escape route, that he actually can move ahead. What I want to ask you before we actually get to the America part, do you think is he pretty common or typical of teenagers, in the Middle East? If they had a ticket to the United States, do you think most of them would jump at that chance? So what's the kind of take? Because the grandmother has this great line about, I don't care if the streets were paved with gold, I wouldn't move to America. That's a terrible place. Is that typical of a youth, in general, or is it just specific people, and that like the character in your movie?
I think it's pretty mixed, actually.
Okay.
I mean, I was kind of surprised to learn when I was casting in the West Bank and traveling all over the place, meeting Palestinian, young, 16-year-old boys. I was really surprised to learn that most of them did want to go to the U.S.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, it was really. I think I thought that was just a myth, or that the idea of the American dream was sort of fading from people's consciousness. In part because of the Bush administration and the reputation the U.S. had during that time. And I was really surprised. I mean, life there is really bleak. Yeah. And I think a lot of young people are like, hell yeah, I'd get out of here. Even if it is to go to the place that, in some ways they are, believe is, not so great. Or
infidels, hellhole or something.
Well, not exactly that, but it's complicated. I think there are very mixed feelings about the U.S. On one level it does represent opportunity, but on another level the U.S. is complicit in the occupation and in oppressing the Palestinian people. So it's definitely mixed.
Yeah. So this family arrives in America, and through a kind of a serendipity, they end up losing what money they had. We don't need to get into that so much, but she arrives staying with relatives, which seems like a pretty nice situation. And yet your lead character panics and insists that she must get a job right away, and she just has to start paying her way and all of this. And I was wondering, how typical is that? It seems to me if I had just come all thousands of miles and was just settling in, that I would take some time, take advantage of my family's beneficence, and just sort of get sort of acclimated to the culture. Instead, she's a very prideful woman, I guess, in a lot of ways. Again, is that typical of the culture, or is it just particular to this particular woman that you're focusing on?
I think it's actually both. I mean, I think that generally speaking, it is typical of the culture. We are people that are, we are full of pride. And I think it's also typical of the culture that we don't want to burden our loved ones, and we also don't want our loved ones to worry about us. So often there is this this phenomenon whereby we say things that aren't necessarily true, like everything's great, we're doing fine, I got this great job, and you say that in order to just alleviate any kind of worry that people might have about you.
Yeah.
And that is a cultural phenomenon.
Is that right? Yeah.
Do you notice how I'm staying away from the word lying? Like, I'm like, it's not really a lie. You just don't want people to worry.
It's a well-intentioned lie.
Exactly.
It's a white lie, the whitest of lies. Now, one of the embarrassments in terms of pride that she's hiding, she ends up the only kind of job, even though she's has worked in banks and has a lot of serious professional experience. The only job she can land is at White Castle, which is the height of embarrassment, I guess, to her. I was wondering how you chose White Castle, and did the Harold and Kumar White Castle movie be a reason to do it or not to do it?
No, Harold and Kumar actually was a reason to do it. It was very clear that White Castle was film friendly, and White Castle is just a really interesting place because they're very people of color friendly, and they're very immigrant friendly, and their burgers are so cheap that literally everyone can afford them. So it's sort of this place where everyone goes. Like, there's just a sense of acceptance around White Castle, and there's kind of an interesting culture around that company. Oh. Yeah, there is. And Harold and Kumar, again, another sort of like people of color, characters of color kind of a movie, and it's also like a teenage hangout in the Midwest. It's very specific to Chicago. It was founded in Chicago. And so those were a number of the reasons that I chose White Castle. Okay, and they were great. I mean, to their credit, they read the script and loved it and immediately came on board. There was never a question.
Well, I must say that the manager at that White Castle is the most accommodating fast food manager I can imagine, with all the people that he has to deal with in the movie. So yeah, I think that is interesting. I didn't know if.
Actually, we created the White Castle. We built the White Castle.
Is that right?
Yes.
So that's a set.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Pretty convincing. Now, I'm not from Chicago, so I don't really know. I only know White Castle through the movies, I guess, and the like. But that's pretty. That's good. So that allowed you to have complete camera access, and could you have actually made it?
Well, it wasn't entirely a set because we shot the film in Canada, and we shot the American part in Canada. And they don't have White Castle in Canada. So we actually took a fast food joint and converted it into a White Castle. And to White Castle's credit, they sent us a huge truck full of merchandise, like signage and lights and all kinds of things.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's very interesting.